Welcome. What is up? Welcome to the Mixer. I am your host, RC. I'm joined by my co-host here, Jeff. Jeff, how you doing, dude?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back home in Idaho. It was a nice couple weeks in San Diego, but now it's good to be back. So, how
Yeah,
about you?
bummer I missed you, man, when you were in town here in sunny SD. But life, that's how it goes.
Exactly.
Let's get into it though. First things first, we are the Mixer. You can follow us on all social channels at FCwineMixer. Primary one to get in touch with us is through Twitter. That is where we are the most active, live tweeting, interacting, DMs are open, all that good stuff. You can always check out links in the show notes. They are there. We are on YouTube. It's the Mixer. You can see me broadcasting from the lovely nursery. Little Winnie the Pooh in the background that may or may not be in shot. And we are on all podcast feeds. That might be untrue. We're on most podcast feeds. The important ones, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and some others. I don't know how they get there. It's the cloud. It's the blockchain. I think they're there. But yeah, rate and review, share around. Hope you enjoy it. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. First things first, we got to start with tilts. Jeff, do you have any tilts this week?
Yeah, I have two. I have one is about having a backyard, just a yard in general. We all know that weeds grow relatively quickly, but when you're gone for 2 weeks, they turn into trees. So I actually went to Home Depot this morning and bought a tool to help get rid of weed, help pull them out of the ground so we can make sure we get all the roots and stuff. And I'll be spending probably this afternoon doing that, and then the next couple of days, just because I don't really feel like banging it out over like 7 hours. So I'll probably do a couple hours today, a couple hours tomorrow, that kind of thing. My other tilt is not completely a tilt, but a little bit of a tilt. So, being a longtime F1 fan, as I have been, right? So for the last year and a half, I've known Lewis Hamilton for probably a little over a decade. Known who he was. The guy's just extremely famous, but haven't really watched F1. Then, talking to you got me into F1, all that. Well, I've slowly realized, and I shared a post in our group chat today, but I'm very slowly becoming a Max Verstappen fan, which hurts my heart a little bit, which is why I'm tilted. And I realized a big reason why I'm enjoying Max and why I enjoy him is because, I don't know if you know this, Rob, but I really love a good villain. And Max is more than happy to be a villain, it seems like, which, endears him to me. So, yeah, those are my tilts for this week. I don't know what you got.
Embracing the heel. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it doesn't. But this one surprised me because he's directly opposite of, like, one of my favorites, Lewis. So it's kind of like, that's where it's really tilting me. So.
Verstappen's still very young. We do not know what type of man he's going to grow into. I know his dad was a jerk. Jos Verstappen. Jos, if you're out there listening, I apologize, but it's true. And I mean, I had a similar experience because Sebastian Vettel was my dude. And then Danny Rick came up and I was like, who the hell is this smiley Australian guy trying to steal his shine, winning races from Vettel? And now he's my favorite driver. Bit of a personality difference between Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, but
true.
It's good for this will be good for the show. If you're defending Verstappen, I feel like we're on the same page with a lot of arguments. We need to be opposed to get that, to get that Stephen A. Skip Bayless dynamic going.
I will say though, I will not defend. Like if we're talking about Lewis, I'm probably on Team Lewis 99 out of 100 times. But anyone else, I would probably defend Max.
Yeah, who would have thought I was going to be the Lewis stan out of the two of
Exactly.
us.
One thing I do have to say real quick, and I know we haven't really talked about F1. We're going to save that for later, but I was thinking about it, and there's, at least in my opinion, not very many like unlikable F1 drivers from what I can tell. They all seem to be, outside of Kimi, at least somewhat decent in talking to the press, and he seems to just not like it, which is why he is the way he is. But
everybody loves Kimi.
Yeah, exactly.
There's Nikita Mazepin, which I won't get into too much. He had some problematic things off the track leading up to this season. He is the most unliked one, but I won't get into those details. But you could look it up. He had some, again, a question. I think we talked about it before a little bit.
Yeah.
Some harassment of a woman. So, but other than that, yeah, this is probably the most likable grid there's been in a while, and maybe Drive to Survive has something to do with that. That kind of transitions nicely into my tilts. So we will be talking more F1 later on with a very, very special guest, one Liz Loza from Yahoo Fantasy Sports. How the hell did we get Liz Loza? Great question. She tweeted about Formula One, and I responded, and she agreed to come on. So that's what we're going to have. We're going to have that. We're actually going to record that tomorrow. Today is Wednesday. We're going to record that Thursday. We're going to cut it in so you won't notice the difference. But yeah, so I mean, big days ahead. Really excited to have Liz on. We're going to talk a little fantasy football with her as well. That is her specialty. Dabbles in F1. She's F1 curious. So we'll see how that conversation goes. But that is, this is definitely a tilting moment in the pod history. Is FCwineMixer going to the moon? Are we on the stock to flow model? If you do not know what the stock to flow model is, look it up. Basically, the stock to flow model means that the lie that millennials can pay off their student loans by foregoing the Starbucks and avocado toast may actually be true if they start stacking sats and buying Bitcoin. Not financial advice. Don't sue me. But you should buy Bitcoin if you're not. Seriously, you should.
Hold on the Bitcoin front, Saquon Barkley taking all of his endorsements in Bitcoin from now on.
Saw that. There's going to be more of that coming. I am stoked. TB12 got laser eyes. So, yeah, buy the dip. Anyway, the other tilt that I have, I am legitimately terrified by this. So, my man Blippi, you remember me talking about Blippi, the YouTuber, dork with glasses and a pinwheel beret. Part of his videos, he has like 1 million, infinite more YouTube subscribers than us. So, I'm trying to look at it from the content perspective. But anyway, he goes to these, I don't know if you know, but remember ball pits at fast food places? Well, now there may have been always, but there's playhouses, play rooms or whatever, where you can go, you pay. It's like freaking amusement park. So little girl, my daughter, she loves watching those videos. I'm like, wonder if there's one nearby. There's one down the street. So started taking her there. There's a little toddler area, for 3, 4 under. My daughter is advanced as far as it comes to activity. So she's tired of the little kids section. I took her over to the big jungle gym area with kids, 12 and under, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
The speed that these kids have, and seeing my daughter like getting closer to 5, 6, the way they just throw their bodies around with reckless abandon. There's kids running around like freaking Bob Sanders, just going down the slides. There was this one girl, a little girl. She was like 7 or 8, and she's going down the slide, and it's one of those bumpy ones, and she's like jumping, going down, and then she gets to the bottom, and she just like crashes and rolls into the thing, and she's like, whoa. And the only thing I can think of is my little daughter snapping her pretty little neck. And yeah, I'm terrified. And there's kids. I mean, they're just running around. They're not checking the corners. They're not.
Yeah.
They don't have their head on a swivel. I'm worried that it's going to be like outfielders going for a fly ball, and nobody's calling I got it, and they're just going to, head injury.
Well, Rob, there's this really cool thing for kids, and it's the fact that kids just don't get hurt.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And
They're
so
kind of rubber.
so they don't worry about that stuff. Like they'll hit something and they'll just bounce right back up, right? So just, you know what? I get it. Be worried. Be a dad, right? But just let her have fun. Let the other kids have fun. Someone gets hurt, they get hurt, but kids just don't get hurt these days.
I started sweating when I saw that. I'm sweating right now just thinking about it. I actually put her in the jumper for like a minute or two because it was during the week and there was only like 2 little kids in there. And then these freaking boys, these like 10-year-old boys that were having a party, just go in there and just start jumping like crazy. My daughter's like laying on the ground because they bounced too hard. And so I jumped in there real quick and snagged her out. But yeah, I'm not putting her in there again. I mean, she had a blast for those 2 minutes, though, man. It's the happiest not the happiest I've seen her, but she was just going crazy. So yeah, the kid, Rob versus parenting is always probably going to be a tilt.
A tilt.
Yeah, let's get into the content though. Let's talk some sports. If we have some new listeners out there, I want to start with soccer first because that kind of ended first. We had the Euro finals and the Copa America finals. So Argentina and Messi got over the hump, got that monkey off his back, whatever phrase you want to use, lifted a trophy for Argentina for the first time. Big Messi fan here, so super happy to see that. I think no, it didn't go to penalties. They got to the finals by winning in penalties. Yeah. Di Maria, right? Is he a Bayern player?
I think he is.
Maybe PSG now.
I think he's just PSG, if I remember correctly.
Anyway, big European player. He got a goal on. He just had an awesome 2 touches. Ball over the goalie, empty net, floated it in under the bar. Really, really tidy. Messi had a chance to put it away late and was not able to, but didn't matter. They won. Thoughts and prayers to Neymar. And then, that game wasn't as entertaining as the Euro final, which was England versus Italy. England scored in the first 2 minutes, and instantly everybody thought, too early. Italy clawed one back before the end of regulation, and then they went to extra time. Nobody scored, so it went to penalty kicks. Jordan Pickford, the English goalie, made 2 saves, but the story of the penalty kicks are the 3 misses by England players. It all kind of went downhill when Marcus Rashford did his elongated starter step walk up, and 2 other English players missed, including Arsenal youngster Saka, right? The 19-year-old. He took the last penalty kick and missed it. Unfortunately, there were some, racist comments and abuse by fans afterwards towards the 3 black players who missed their penalty kicks, which I didn't even think of. You were on it right away, though. You said this might get ugly afterwards, and all I could think of was just Marcus Rashford's run up and why on earth would he do that? I wasn't really thinking about too much else. So, what are your comments? Italy, they just went, they buried their shots despite the 2 saves by Pickford. So, Italy brings the cup home. It's not coming home. It's coming Rome. Heartbreak for England. What are your thoughts on the Euro final outcome?
Yeah, so I was happy about it. So for those that don't know, I married into an Italian family. So Italy winning, even though they're not big soccer fans. Well, my wife enjoys soccer, but the rest of her family is not the biggest soccer fans. So we watched it. It was nice that they won because happy wife, all that stuff. First thing I want to say, congrats to Leo Messi. He finally won his major title, and he signed a new contract, it appears. 5 years. I think it said it's like half his wage compared to the last one. But if you read about the last one, it was like 4 years, $600 million. If this is half of that, it's still a boatload of money. But other than that, back to the England-Italy final, Matt and I talked a little bit in the chat. I don't understand what England does. England looked like the worst team the whole game, other than like the second minute of the game, in my opinion. Especially once Italy settled down and got into the game, they had more possession, more chances. To me, they just looked like the better team. England plays Harry Kane, who is, a very, very great striker. But his best attribute is probably just being in the right place at the right time. It's not really like creating goals and stuff like that, in my opinion. I thought England should have gone to like Sancho, Rashford, or Saka much, much earlier in the game. They, I think, would have brought new life into it. And Sterling could have, if they could have gotten him the ball more and he could have just run on at that Italy defense, I think could have wreaked havoc. But they didn't seem to make that a priority a whole lot. But his pace, the few times that he did get the ball, he just caused a lot of issues. Now, Italy defended decently well, and obviously they only give up the one goal at the beginning. But I thought Sterling could have done a lot more had he been given the opportunity. And I just didn't think Kane was the right player for the situation, if that makes sense. As far as the penalties go, is there another goalie in the world you would pick over Donnarumma? The dude is 6'5". He's got this incredible wingspan. Like, if I'm picking a goalie or if I'm creating a goalie, like, he looks like what I want. Okay. Secondly, I played goalie at a decently high level here in America when I was growing up. And I can tell you from my experience, I would much prefer someone stutter step their way up to the ball than to just run up and kick it. The longer you give me to read what you're doing as a goalie, the better I feel, in my opinion. I've never been a fan of the stutter step. And I think Rashford just kind of overthought it himself and tried to be too perfect. When in reality, if you're the kick taker, I mean, we saw it, I think it was Maguire did it. If you just hit the ball hard enough, the goalie has no chance, right? And Kane did it with his first penalty, right? He just puts it in the side and he just hits it hard, and Donnarumma guessed right and had no chance at catching it or at stopping it, right? So, that kind of, I don't know. Stutter stepping to me shows a lack of confidence, in my opinion. But
same thing with going down the middle.
Yeah, as far as like the racism
unless
stuff goes,
the goalie has a tendency to dive full, every single time.
Which most do. Like, most goalies are just picking a side, whatever they read, and they're going for it, right? Because that's your only chance. You can't wait till guys kick the ball. You kind of have to go before they kick it. But yeah, as far as the racism stuff goes, England's an incredibly racist place from my understanding. You hear about it all the time with Premier League guys, with soccer games, like, so as far as like what happened after the game, it's incredibly sad, but it was just far too predictable that something like that was going to happen. And then, like you said, I brought it up in our group chat, and it seemed like the English soccer committee or whatever had to make a comment about it within hours of losing the game, and it's like, it's just sad that people react that way. Especially when like, maybe it wasn't the best coached game or the best played. Like, you probably didn't even need to get to penalty kicks if you play it right. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
You got to
Kind of
play
my
for that.
thoughts there.
You score that early, you got to play for that second goal. I don't know how you don't. And they looked at points to be a little dangerous. I know Harry Kane actually did have a decent run with the ball at the top of the box. I don't even think he got a shot off, but I was impressed with the little bit of open space he created. The one good thing about England not bringing the cup home is it's another title that Harry Kane doesn't have. I mean, Tottenham's trophy case has been collecting nothing but dust for a while, and there are talks of him moving to Manchester City. So as I'm saying this, is probably just a total jinx, and they'll win the treble next year. But for now, at least, I had been fading England throughout the whole tournament. I picked Croatia to go deep, and then I finally put some money on England to win the thing, and they didn't win the thing. I did live bet though when England went up 1-0. I live bet that it would end in a regulation and a draw. So I was able to
go.
Yeah, I was able to hit that. So, and I actually bet on when it went to halftime for the next goal to be scored before the 70th minute. And I think it was scored in the 68th. So a little bit of luck there, but just reading the game, that was kind of my feel on it. So I can't get over that Rashford PK. He did the stutter step, got the goalie to go the other way, and then hit the post. So congrats, you played yourself. I do not wish, he is not getting the criticism. He is. I mean, it's tough to do. It's very tough to be a professional athlete in that spot. The extreme criticism brought about because of his race is totally unnecessary. But you got to take a better PK, dude. You got to take a better PK if we're being honest. So let's move on. Well, actually, a crossover item. Lando Norris, McLaren Formula One driver, was at the race and he was involved in an incident, I believe is the official statement that McLaren put out. I did read from I think it was somewhere on Twitter, this semi-reputable source, that he got mugged and he got his watch stolen. He had a McLaren watch. So he will be racing this weekend.
My understanding of this is that the watch that was stolen is a 1 of 1. So if somebody goes to sell that, that will be interesting, because it's generally really hard to sell things that are 1 of 1 when they're not yours.
A few years ago, somebody broke into the Red Bull Racing headquarters. It was a total Italian job type of heist where they broke in, threw a bunch of the trophies from the lobby into their van and took off. I don't know if they ever recovered those, but supposedly those things aren't worth any real money. They're not real metal. I mean, it's just like a freaking trophy shop trophy where they're just kind of ornamental. But yeah, what's the play? Do you sell it to Illuminati parties? So some rich person who probably has people from the F1 circle can like go into your trophy room. And anyway, I don't know what that play is. So let's move on. Let's talk baseball next. So I mean, just quickly on the Padres, I am kind of pushing the panic button. They keep losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to. I've been saying it's early in the season. It doesn't really matter. They're 6 games out. They keep dropping games to the Rockies, to the Diamondbacks, to the Nationals, who are good, to the Mets, who are also somewhat good. I'm hoping the Padres can turn that around and, come out of the break good, maybe get a good player. But yeah, officially worried. Weather's injured. He's going to be out a few weeks. And we had the home run derby and the All-Star game. Pete Alonso, second year running from the New York Mets. He wins the home run derby. Shohei didn't make it out of the first round despite being the favorite. Put on a hell of a show against Juan Soto, though. And I forgot how incredibly boring the All-Star game is. From the years when the Padres didn't have any players and had no reason to watch. Watched it last night. Bro, the crowd is dead. I mean, what are your thoughts on the All-Star game and home run derby that we just had?
Yeah, so the home run derby is always enjoyable, although I don't particularly like the new format. I like the old format where you just got 10 outs and you just hit bombs until you got 10 outs. The baseball All-Star game, in my opinion, is the worst of all the All-Star games. It is just, I don't care about it. Occasionally there's a matchup that I enjoy, like the Ohtani Tatis matchup was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then there was a cool moment where Tatis is being talked to as Vlad hits his 800-foot home run, and Tatis's reaction was kind of cool to see. But, other than that, I didn't get to watch much of it. We were driving home for the home run derby, and then I just didn't feel like watching the All-Star game last night because I, like you, find it boring. It's not entertaining. It's not, baseball. I think the thing about baseball to me is the actual watching of playing a game. It's kind of boring just watching things, right? But when your team's involved and everyone in it matters to you, that's when baseball becomes exciting, right? But in an All-Star game, there's not going to be a lot of strategy. It's really just pitch, hit, pitch, hit. And, a lot of times we get a bunch of strikeouts in an All-Star game, not very many hits. It's just that kind of stuff. And it just doesn't create an exciting game to me, at least in the NBA All-Star game, which also gets a lot of hate because there's no defense. I at least enjoy watching people dunk, watching people hit 40-foot threes just for fun. That stuff's exciting to me. But in the baseball All-Star game, feels like half the guys strike out when they come up anyway. So you're just getting a lot of nothing.
I was very disappointed. And the broadcast for the home run derby, yeah, the format's a little confusing with the bonus hits, and I mean you could just throw nonstop. There's no outs anymore. I think it could be tweaked. I think it's kind of entertaining, but with the balls are just flying out so frequent, it's kind of hard to keep track of. I mean, the only thing I care about is the distance and the number, but the distance wasn't part of the broadcast, at least easily. Maybe that's just harder to come up with, but they had the launch angle and the exit velocity right away, which is kind of cool, but they can do better. So
I also think too, home run derby wise, if it went to a 3-point shootout style where you just got a certain amount of pitches, I would be more into that. I don't like the time frame, 4 minutes or whatever it is, and then you get 30 seconds if you hit it this far is just really boring to I can go. I can't because they don't let you into parks half the time, but you used to be able to just go watch these guys take batting practice, and that's all that it is, right? I'd much rather watch them get 20 pitches, and how many out of 20 do you hit out? That would be entertaining to me.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so that's baseball. We got the All-Star break right now. I think the games pick up again Friday. So trade deadline's coming. Chris Bryant is coming to San Diego. You heard it here first. Just a wild guess. But let's touch on NBA shortly. So we just had game 3. The Bucks won. So it is not Suns in 4. Are we going to get a gentleman's sweep? Is it going to be 4-1? I mean, what are the Bucks' chances of making this a series? Game 4 is tonight.
So
Thursday.
A coworker of mine got the Bucks plus 205 as a line for the series. And I actually think if you're on the Bucks, I think that's a great line to get. implies that there's about a 33% chance the Bucks win the series at this point. So if you think the Bucks are better than that, if you think they're 40-60 or 50-50, anything around plus 200 is probably a good number for you. But in my mind, I think whoever wins game 4 is going to win the series. I think if the Suns win it, they go up 3-1. I think they probably close it out in game 5 back in Phoenix. But if the Bucks win, they tie it up 2-2. And I could see them using that momentum of coming back after losing the first 2 games and riding that to a series win. I don't think they would rattle off 4 straight, right? Like, I don't think they would beat the Suns in 6, but I do think they would beat them in 7 if it came down to it. So in my mind, whoever wins game 4 is likely to win the series.
By the time you listen to this game will have happened already. I appreciate your prediction. I tend to agree with you. There's definitely a momentum swinging game here. I have 2 non-on the court piece of analysis. Number 1, I do not like the Bucks court, like the hardwood. I mean, I'm a big fan of green. Green's my favorite color in my high school. Felix High School with Alex Smith and Reggie Bush. No big deal. Was green. So I am partial to it, but I don't know why. And it's a new arena too. It's just, I don't know. It's not very aesthetically pleasing, but that's a me problem, admittedly. What I don't think is a me problem is why are the NBA courtside guys the worst? I'm not a fan of the broadcast team. Are you partial to them?
I'm not a fan of most announcers. I'll put it that way. I think announcing these days is trying too hard to make things entertaining. I wish announcers would just go back to doing what they did when they had to call radio games or games for radio, when you're really just calling plays, right? Like, oh, this person does this, they're running this, that kind of stuff. I care way more about that than I do storylines and, that kind of stuff. That just doesn't do it for me. That's why I think Romo is one of my favorite announcers. He tends to be more play oriented. I know you're not a Romo fan, but you like to be wrong, so that's fine. But no, I do agree with you that NBA announcers are not the business. They could be improved.
I'm gonna admit, you had me in the first half there. I was nodding along, and then you brought up Romo as a good example. But we got football season to talk about Romo, and it's not like I hate him or anything. I just not a fan of his broadcast style. I am a fan of Joe Buck, who did the All-Star game, who had an amazing zinger on the intro. He said, I'm quoting, paraphrasing roughly. He said, I hear it's never an all-star game until I have heard Coolio or something, because they played like a Coolio song in the intro. Yeah, I thought that was hilarious, dad joke. But and then he also, I mean, what a time to be alive, Jeff. He threw in Formula One and mentioned Danny Rick, the one, the only, the smiling assassin, the honey badger, Daniel Ricciardo, Mr. Shuey himself, got mentioned in the All-Star game on Fox, and Fox doesn't even carry Formula One. Formula One's on ESPN, so it wasn't like it was an obligatory tag where he was gonna, transition into some F1 ad. It was organic.
Right.
Would not have happened without Drive to Survive. That's a great spot to transition. We're going to bring you the interview with Liz here next. And now we welcome in our guest. She is a member of the award-winning show Fantasy Football Live. She writes about fantasy sports for Yahoo and has been featured by the New York Times and CNN. Liz Loza joins us now. Liz, welcome to the Mixer. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I do a bajillion podcasts, particularly this time of year, and I am legitimately excited to like delve into this one and talk some new stuff. So thanks for having
Awesome.
me.
Yeah, we're super excited too. You're our first big guest. So thank you so much for joining. So how we got here, just briefly, I came across a revelation while tumbling Twitter, a confession by you that you have not only have become interested in Formula One, but you have become obsessed with it. So how did this obsession start? Was this Netflix's algorithm sending you down a rabbit hole like it has so many others, or
Um,
something more?
so I think it's been a combination of a lot of things. When I talk about my football story, I reference my grandfather and like how I came to become a sports fan and a fantasy sports, my career trajectory into becoming a fantasy sports analyst, and my grandfather. And I was an only child. My mom was a single mom, so he was kind of in charge of me on the daily from a domestic point of view. So I kind of learned stuff that a World War II vet who was raised on the south side of Chicago and like worked on locomotives would learn.
Awesome.
And that was definitely regional sports, pro American sports, but also cars. Like I spent a lot of time changing the oil on his shitty little Datsun. Am I allowed to swear? Sorry.
Yeah, totally.
Like he taught me how to change the oil on a car before it was all computerized and you can't really do it anymore. Which they were smart to make more complicated. But and I grew up in the Midwest, and so there are like monster truck events and small level racing events. My mom has a checkered, to use a pun, dating past, and definitely dated dudes who were into muscle cars. So a Pantera, in fact, she dated one guy who was
Oh,
very into
nice.
his Pantera di Tommaso. So I spent a lot of time like rolling under cars and learning this sort of stuff. I am definitely not as much of a race car aficionado and much more at heart. Like I drive a truck and
Mhm.
a Jeep Wrangler, stick shift, no automatic steering, no air conditioning, nothing, with my first car. I have this
Nice.
lifelong dream of like rebuilding a CJ7, and it's just never something that's I've talked about because it didn't really cross over with sports. Although I did a show with Martellus Bennett, we would talk about Jeeps all of the time. But when
Awesome.
the pandemic happened and we were all binging Netflix, this amazing show that you're referencing, this reality show, came into being, and I was just like, I'm also like a racehorse fan,
Mhm.
because my grandpa would take me to the track a lot, and I had a pod producer who recommended this podcast about racehorsing. I'm sorry, horse racing.
There
Not
you go.
thank you. I had this pod producer who recommended this all their podcast about horse racing, and when I like the way that the bets make sense to me in horse racing. And so when the Netflix show came out, I was like, oh, this is like kind of similar. Like it's the human element isn't really about the athletics necessarily, but their control over this other thing, this engineering. And, race horses are engineered for speed, and these cars are built for speed. And to me, there was a very easy, and some might argue more humane leap from horse racing to Formula One racing. And as I watched the show and like got to know these drivers and the politics between the different teams, I fell in love with it and was just like, oh, I never liked NASCAR. I never like vibed. I went to a bunch of NASCAR races growing up, and I just never like, I dug it, but I never really
Mhm.
liked it a ton. But F1 just added this whole like global international feel to it that I immediately fell in. I love that like these drivers are like representing countries, but their own countries, but also in nations, like driving for nations that have nothing to do with that. Like it all, I think it's all like really fascinating, even from a sociological standpoint. So it got me.
There,
That's a very
there's a
long
lot
winded
of
answer.
there's a lot of simpatico here. I have two very important follow up questions. What year and make was the Datsun,
Oh God.
or do you know? Is it,
I mean, I don't, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So
was it a 2-seater?
It
Like
was
from
maroon.
the 70s, like 72?
No,
70?
it wasn't. I think it was probably like an early 80s. Like it was used and it was a 2-seater and it was maroon and we called it the Cardinal.
Gotcha. Yeah, those I love Datsuns. The second follow up, I mean, you mentioned a Pantera, which is up west or Midwest classy. How many Fieros were in your life? I have some Ohio roots, so I know the Fieros. Just Pontiac Fiero has a special spot in my heart. So
yeah, I mean, actually, you mentioned the Fieros. This is not a race car, but my first car was a Pontiac Grand Prix. So yes, and I grew up in the Midwest, so this all makes very much sense.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. You already mentioned what draws your interest to the sport. So what are some of your favorite drivers and tracks so far? Did you just start? So you just started watching it. This is your first season, or were you able to catch last season?
Well, I am. So I have watched. I'm into the third season, but because I'm into the third season of the show. But while I was watching the second season of the show, I couldn't handle it anymore and had to jump into real time, which I was like, well, do I do this without spoilers? But then I was like, nah, man, like I'm a fantasy sports analyst. Sports betting is like what I do. I can't, I don't care. Give me the spoilers. So
yeah,
I started following the current, what's going on right now. Like, obviously we're going to talk about the Grand Prix that's happening on the 18th, the British Grand Prix. But am watching the show in real time as well. I'm in the third season, but it's, a weird balance.
Nice.
Awesome.
And so, real quick, do you have any favorites from the show so far? Like favorite drivers and stuff like that?
100%. Well, I love Lewis Hamilton because I think he is so unique. And so I follow him. I've been following him on Twitter for like a while now. I think he's an incredible, he seems like a really good progressive human. I like what he has to say often. I think he carries himself brilliantly and is also a winner. So nobody can like really go after him, although Verstappen continues to try and, is on a bit of a hot streak here, as we'll discuss, I'm sure. I also really love Danny Ricciardo, man. I flipping love the fact, and even though Danny Ricciardo has definitely struggled outside of the Red Bull car, I love the fact that he found out what Verstappen was getting paid and was like, nah, I'm the senior driver. Like, I've seen the checkered flag and been on the podium plenty for this company and this team. And you're going to pay him what? Nah, I'm not taking it. I'm going to bet on myself. Obviously, it did not work out that well in Renault, but he's with McLaren now. And that, I think, is an interesting twist. And I think he's funny. I have a little bit of crush on him. I think he's cute. But I fell in love with him the moment that he was like not going to put up with all of the antics that is included in the Red Bull team.
You know your stuff, Liz. That happened a few years ago. And I mean, Danny, I think you could tell the quality of a person. I think the old question was if you were a Messi or Ronaldo fan. I think the new question is if who's your favorite driver, and Danny Ricciardo is not in the conversation, then I don't know if I trust those people because I have a crush on him. Jeff, do you have a crush on him?
Of course. We have a whole family crush. My wife loves him. I love him. He's awesome.
I think he's great. And I also don't appreciate, by the way, that the narrative was spun that he was like, well, if he were man enough, then he'd be willing to compete against Verstappen. So clearly he doubts himself. And I was like, nah, because that is just like overlord manipulation. Of course, that's what Red Bull wants him to believe, because then they have two of the best drivers competing with one another for a massive amount of team points. Forget that. Danny Ricciardo is not going to be disrespected and doubted for the benefit of the man. Take your high energy drink elsewhere, sir. I loved it.
Awesome. So are McLaren your team then?
I
Or
don't really. The team thing, I think I probably follow. Honestly, I like the Williams team because they're such a damn mess. Like that's, I always like the underdog. I don't really root for a team as much. Mercedes. It's hard not to root for Mercedes. You know, it's like a brand that has crushed in every single vertical that they've attempted. It feels like from SUV to Formula One to regular luxury sedan. So it's obviously one that's really familiar. And Lewis Hamilton makes it really hard to not like them as a team. And I don't know, they just don't seem messy. I don't like Red Bull though. Like to me, Red Bull feels very, very messy. And I don't think that Christian is being a hundo P faithful to Ginger Spice there. Just some body language I'm reading.
They used to be.
I have to out Rob real quick. Rob has been against Lewis and Mercedes for the last few years. And he's on Team Ferrari, so he's like.
But yeah. I'm into Ferrari because I'm into Carlos.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do
think it's fascinating though. Hold on. Like this is what I mean. This is like basically an episode of Grey's Anatomy back when Danny Duquette was on the show. It's that complicated and good. Because I love that Ricciardo left Red Bull to join Renault. That meant that Carlos had to leave, went to McLaren, and now Danny is in McLaren and Carlos goes to Ferrari. Amazing.
Yeah, the team politicking, I mean, it knows no ends. If you go into the history of Formula One, there's been teammates crashing into each other. I don't know if you're into documentaries, but there's a documentary on a driver, Ayrton Senna, a Brazilian driver, and kind of his drama coming up and how he became one of the best drivers in the sports. It's by the same director that did the Amy Winehouse documentary. I suggest giving it a watch if you're into that, because it goes to a lot of the behind the scenes politicking with the teams. So, and I mean, it's been nonstop. We had Vettel crashing into Webber as teammates, Rosberg crashing into Hamilton as teammates. There hasn't been so much of that lately, but I mean, yeah, it's great when you have those team battles and those storylines. So I mean, you've kind of already given your pitch, but you know, what would you say to people who might be on the fence or haven't watched a race that might entice some people in?
I mean, I feel like if you are someone who likes drama and adrenaline, then Formula One was created just for you. Like once you get to know these drivers and these players, the engineers, the politics, all of it, and you understand their agenda, you have agendas and points of views. And then also once you're invested in their stories, watching them fly around the track and like holding your breath and knowing that something bad is like just feeling that something bad is going to happen or maybe not. And like watching them try to pass each other, like to me, it is very much like horse racing. Like it's just that adrenaline of like, come on, go, 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 go. Oh, and it takes so much in some ways. And maybe this is like, I never thought I'd make this comp on a sports podcast, but it's very like has an Ayn Rand feel about it because it is controlled, not natural. Like the fact that it is man-made or person-made power and engineering that creates the vehicle that these drivers are responsible for, as opposed to a jockey and a horse. Even though, again, like I said, these horses are being bred for speed, which is adding a bunch of problems to why they're falling all over the fields and breaking their legs. But
right,
I think that like Atlas Shrugged feel to it just adds another level of. I think people watch they watch car racing and they think that it's not an intellectual sport, but the amount of intelligence necessary to make it happen and to follow it is surprisingly high. And I don't think that was properly highlighted until the Netflix series.
Yeah, that they're like fighter pilots, all the G loads that they have to take. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever done a little 10-minute race at a legitimate go-kart track, but you feel beat up afterwards. So I mean, these guys are actually like jockey size, especially like Yuki Tsunoda. He's a smaller guy. but they are strong. They are definitely athletes.
I also think just one last thing, when you look at the tracks from a bird's eye view, it's fascinating to see how many turns and swirls and what each sector requires throughout a race course. And I don't think a lot of people ever look at that, just sort of like, oh, you're sitting in a line and it's really, really fast. But when you look at the intricacies of each of these courses from above, which again, the Netflix series does with their amazing drones and unlimited budget, it's really, really fascinating. I mean, I think the Hungarian Grand Prix, which is coming up, I believe August 1st, just after the British Grand Prix, has one of the most insane back and forths in Sector 2 that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Jeff,
yeah. And
what
another way that appreciation, sorry, Rob, is I was telling Rob about this earlier. I don't know if you're a video game person at all, Liz, but if you ever play like the F1 video games, it gives you another appreciation for the tracks as well. You actually get to see like the turns, how the cars take it. Obviously not the exact same as being in a car, but it does give you a similar appreciation to like the uniqueness of these tracks as well.
Yeah, and we got some very unique layouts coming up. Vietnam, the track in Miami that's going to race around the Hard Rock Stadium, that's going to be a unique layout. They've been kind of getting more creative with the design lately. There was a while in the 2000s where they felt a bit samey, but they're getting a little more unique. There's a race in the Netherlands too that is going to be interesting towards the end of the year. That Verstappen's going to win, but I mean, what can you do? So let's. Oh, I was going to give my pitch to people. I mean, just briefly. Yeah, being the senior F1 correspondent of our very humble pod here. I think the tech and the engineering really matter. There's a lot of stuff that are on cars nowadays, a lot of safety features and a lot of other things that were developed by racing cars. And as like our resources are becoming more scarce and we have to be more energy efficient, it's having a competition like this really pushes engineers to come up with creative solutions to move us around. And they're doing hybrid stuff right now. There's talks that the next engine formula might be hydrogen. So we'll see, but it's arenas like this where that gets pushed forward. So let's transition into the Silverstone race, the British Grand Prix. That's this weekend. I mean, you're picking an interesting time to come on and talk about this, Liz, because we have our first qualifying race on Saturday. So the traditional qualifying is going to set the grid on Friday. Anywho, but let's get into betting. I'm still kind of feeling it out for myself where to bet these. I use Bookmaker. They don't have very much variety for what you can bet. I know Bovada does and MyBookie does as well, but I do not use them. You can bet championship futures, winners, head-to-head, podiums. Question for Liz, what kind of bets are you making in F1, and what are you looking for when making a wager on a race?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, BetMGM does have a Formula One offering, and that is the platform that I use we have a relationship with them at Yahoo. And so that is the platform I pretty much use for everything anyway. Obviously, there are legalities state by state, but just FYI, if you are in one of those states, BetMGM does have a platform, and that is the one I'm the most acquainted with. I think when you mention in terms of where to figure things out, there is an interesting twist because of the F1 sprint, the qualifier on Saturday that you mentioned. Now we're having that for the first time, and that's going to determine pole position. Obviously, Verstappen is the favorite. He's been on a 3-win hot streak. But also this is Lewis Hamilton's playground. This is, not last year, not necessarily withstanding, although he did win one of the 2 races at Silverstone last year, I believe. This is
on 3 tires. That was a
right,
crazy race.
Yes. That's a great point. And that this is his homecoming. And, these are two super competitive guys. And Verstappen, to me, has a very Ivan Drago feel about him. And
that is a comp.
I think that Hamilton is behind Verstappen in the odds, but the more than debating, because I think a lot will be determined on Saturday's sprint, more than debating who's going to win, one of the categories that I was looking at is winner without the big four. Because that's when, like, that comp to me in fantasy football is like, all right, which of these wide receivers three, this glut of wide receiver three options, are you actually drafting? Who's going to pop? Are you really going to roll with a Robbie Anderson? Or is that just like something you wrote to stay funny on Twitter, right? Like, so I think without Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas, and Perez, like, Norris is the odds leader. I love the storyline with Gasly, who's at plus 300 odds right behind him. I, however, would put my money on Carlos Sainz with who's at plus 600 odds right now.
I mean, that's an awesome betting feature to be able to take the drivers out of the big four, out of the Mercedes and Red Bull drivers. Sometimes when I'm watching a race, that's the kind of mindset I go into.
Yeah.
I'm looking for that, that battle for best of the rest. Gasly is a great pick. Lando coming off of a mugging at the Euro final. At his home track. Jeff, what about you? What do you think about this weekend? Who do you like? And what are your thoughts heading into this race?
Yeah, so I think even though I'm a huge Lewis fan and always will be, I'm kind of on the I think Max is going to win until somebody stops him, right? Until Mercedes figures something out. I just think that Red Bull car is better right now. And Max and Lewis are probably very similar in terms of how good they are at driving. And I think whoever has the better car is going to win. So that would be Max to me. But Liz, I love your idea of taking that, remove the top four and betting on who's going to win out of everyone else. I think I would get in trouble if I didn't choose Lando at that point, though. That is my wife's favorite driver, and she is absolutely into it. And I love Lando too. He's been great this year. I love the Pierre Gasly story after he got the Red Bull chance, got thrown away basically, said go back. And then he wins a race last year, and now he's performed really well this year outside of, I believe, one race. I think he had one race where he DNF'd and has been in the points every other race. Pierre is up there as well. And I would actually go with the other Ferrari driver. I would go with Leclerc because I just like him more than I like Sainz. Not that I dislike Sainz, but I just think Leclerc is a better driver. So that would probably be I would probably go Lando and then Pierre and then Leclerc.
So what's interesting is BetMGM also has another platform that's winning car without the big two, Mercedes and Red Bull, obviously. And McLaren is the odds-on favorite, giving 105 points, but Ferrari is at plus 200 just behind them. So if you like Leclerc and I like Sainz, I mean, it would make sense that Ferrari would be a nice bet here with plus 200 odds.
Yeah, Ferrari, any bets on Ferrari make me super nervous right now. There's something wrong with the way the car handles the tires right now. They had some real bad issues. I mean, the drivers are certainly capable of, and they've had 2 weeks off, so maybe they get it figured out. But Silverstone is there's a lot of fast corners that'll be pretty abrasive on tires. So I'm nervous about Ferrari prospects. I think I would lean. I would lean towards a McLaren or Gasly if you want the longer odds. But these teams figure stuff out. They find some setting that's wrong and they tweak it, and then all of a sudden, they're half a second faster than anybody. So I'm excited. And then the qualifying race is going to make it even more have more variables. It's going to be a fun
That's
weekend.
kind of why I like Signs, right? Because we know that he is fast, if nothing else. And we know that the Ferrari car, while you're right, like it's had handling issues, it can go it goes quickly. And I feel like he's going to overperform and pull a favorable position. He'll overperform in the sprint and pull a favorable position. So maybe he won't have to press so hard in the actual race and can win outside of the top four. That was my thought process, at least.
Yeah. I'm super excited for this new format.
Yeah.
Really interesting to see how it plays out. Hopefully it goes well. If it goes well, they'll do it more often. If it doesn't go well, I mean, they're supposed to do it 2 other times this year, but they've played with the qualifying format before and just thrown away what they were planning on doing in the past. So yeah, it's going to be entertaining nonetheless. Look for that Saturday, I think 6 Pacific in the morning, or is it 5? I think it's 6 now. But yeah, check it out. Let's transition into some football talk. So fantasy football. Liz, you have a Scott Fishbowl team, right?
I do. Shoot, I might even be on the clock right now. Let me check.
Okay, so you're still drafting. It's how are you feeling about your team so far?
Honestly, I feel better about this year's team than I have maybe any other year. Last year, I loved my team. It started with Dak Prescott. I was all in on a top 3 finish, which he was obviously on pace to beat before the week 5 injury. I always fall into the trap of waiting too long on quarterback, because now that Superflex, even in my Superflex leagues, like I'm always just like waiting, because I draft with a lot of people who work in the industry and we traditionally all wait. And so then I get in the habit of waiting too long and underestimating where other people, like who maybe aren't trained or conditioned in that way. So I feel like I always waited too long on quarterback before. And this year I was like, no, I always get sucked into the like running back early. I am focusing on quarterbacks, and I ran some numbers, and wide receivers offer, at least in this format, the Scott Fishbowl format, the lowest ROI. So I focused on running backs and quarterbacks and waited on wide receivers, because I believe in myself when we get to those glut of wide receiver threes that I mentioned early enough, that I can hit on them appropriately and outkick ADP coverage.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy, kind of going with it seems like in those, or when I hear about or see the mock draft results from those industries, it's like or those industry drafts, it's like a point of pride who's the last one to take the quarterback. But yeah, I've kind of talked about this with Jeff in the past. I'm kind of looking at this year as, I've always kind of had this thought that there becomes this kind of meta strategy that a lot of people employ. One year it's wide receiver heavy, or it's 0 RB. And I just think there's always value in doing the opposite of what that is. So more drafts are happening. It's interesting to see how the ADP is playing out and what strategies people are using. But I like your idea there of going after QBs when others may not be doing it. I mean, Jeff, you talked about that a little bit before, that there's always a quarterback that returns or warrants first round value, and it's not always the guy you think. So
I think in some of the things I've looked at is at the end of the year, there's almost always 1 or 2 QBs that were worth a first or second round pick had you taken them there. The problem is almost never the guy that's taken as the QB 1 or 2, right? We've seen Lamar Jackson do it from like a 14th round ADP, and other guys similar. Liz, I did have a question for you about the Scott Fishbowl, though. I noticed on Twitter you talked about going and getting your guy, Kyler Murray. Did you get him? Yeah,
I did. I'm drafting out of the 4 spot. And to Rob's point a little bit earlier, I think that more than any other format or league I've been a part of, the Scott Fishbowl is the get your guy league. Like ADP means absolutely flipping nothing, because we're all guessing and throwing darts every year based on this like new format, right? Like the scoring system. I mean, the scoring system doesn't last long enough for you to like actually put into place like data and a plan.
Right.
So it's all hip shooting. So like to me, if you got a guy in this league, just go get him. And Kyler Murray was my guy. I've interviewed him personally a bunch of times, so that always does admittedly like help me or hinder me from drafting somebody. But I was drafting from the 4 spot. He was my first pick in the first round, and I was toggling between him and Prescott, but I had done a deep dive as part of this series I write called Rest versus Rust. And Prescott's opening schedule is really, really tough. And I think coming off of the injury, he might be a little bit rattled to begin with. And so, especially in fantasy, you need to win immediately, because if you are 0-3 to start the season, you're kind of screwed. And this league doesn't have any trades or anything, so you can't really. You're at the mercy of the waiver wire, and it's barren, you know. So
Nice.
I went with Kyler to begin with because of the NFC West is just absolutely lit, and I have him ranked slightly ahead of Prescott for those reasons.
You might be happy to hear our home league, the league that the pod is kind of named after, is a 2 QB league, and we have, it's one of those get your guys type of league. So we are team QB earlier than most. So yeah, we do have experience with that as well. So I don't want to give any of your secrets away, but what are some undervalued players you might be targeting this season? Not necessarily for the Scott Fishbowl specifically, because like you said, that's a weird format. But what are some guys that you're going after? I don't know, middle rounds or so.
I have a bunch. So at quarterback, I am all about the Carson Wentz reunion tour with Frank Reich. I believe in it. I think recency bias has completely depressed his ADP. People will talk about the lack of weapons that he has, but T.Y. Hilton still is not nothing. Michael Pittman in his second year, a nice emerging red zone weapon. Paris Campbell, if he's healthy. Okay, now we got a squad put together. We also know that Frank Reich has incredible familiarity with Wentz. Wentz was the QB7 overall in 2017 with Reich, and that was also only over 13 games. So QB7 overall over 13 games. So his per game fantasy output was obviously incredible then. And here's like my favorite stat. Last year under Reich, Phillip Rivers was, depending on your scoring system, the QB20 to QB18. And he managed just 18 rushing attempts for -8 yards and that pop gun arm and no Paris Campbell. So if Phillip Rivers was, let's call it the QB19 under Reich last year, Carson Wentz, who I think can average at least 4 rushing attempts per game, he averaged 4.9 rushing attempts per game in that 2017 season with Reich. He's also getting a massive upgrade in offensive line, right? He went from the Eagles gave up the most sacks last year. The Colts gave up the second fewest last year. So we know he has a strong arm. We know he has mobility. Now we know with this offensive line upgrade, he'll actually have time to plant his feet and find a pass catcher. I think that he can easily be a top 15 or 14 guy, but people are like, nah, he burned me, so I'm not going to mess with him. So I think Carson Wentz is like one of the, I'm believing in, if you're a person who likes to, as we talked about earlier, wait on quarterback, or you're messing with a super flex league, which is my favorite as well, then I think Wentz is a great target. And you don't even have to target him. He'll just like fall to you.
He's definitely there. That's a great name to bring up. And old Phil, special spot in my heart, former Chargers quarterback. I'm happy he can finally spend even more time with all his children. Talking about quarterbacks, a big topic of conversation lately has been the Chargers pass catchers. I'll admit this is a selfish question of mine. I am a Charger fan, being, San Diego born and raised. They broke my heart when they left, blah, blah, blah. Stockholm syndrome. I'm still a fan. How do you see the I don't know, the passing, I guess with Hunter Henry leaving and Mike Williams kind of being hurt, I know a lot of people are taking him early. Do you think that Mike Williams is going to kind of meet where he's currently going? I think I mean, I look at Underdog or Best Ball ADP this time of year, and he's going around like 80th, 82 overall. I think last I checked, it seems high to me. I'm curious what you think of Mike Williams and the opportunity in that passing game.
I know I just talked about and poo-pooed recency bias, but Mike Williams has done it to everybody. So he's like, I think sub 50 in terms of wide receivers and current ADP.
Mm-hmm.
Like to contextualize it, a lot of this depends on roster construction. Would you rather have Marvin Jones in Jacksonville? Marvin Jones, who is perennially underrated and manages double-digit touchdowns every year just because? Right. Or would you rather have someone like Darnell Mooney, right? Like a speedster who started to break out knowing that Anthony Miller is being faded from that offense. Would you like to have him a little bit later? I think if I am, especially in a deeper league, targeting any Chargers pass catcher not named Keenan Allen, or, I mean, I guess you could even argue Austin Eckler because he's so good out of the backfield as a pass catcher. I like Josh Palmer. I feel like I don't talk about an upgrading quarterback, by the way. What he had at Tennessee to what he's getting in Justin Herbert is massive. I don't trust that Mike Williams. Listen, Mike Williams, this is why I did rest versus rust. I did rest versus rust in conjunction with the team doctor at the University of Southern California. He's also an orthopedic surgeon for the university. And I did this to talk about different kinds of injuries and how they present, because it's a topic in fantasy that like we always like to pretend to be a doctor or physical therapist, but like when you actually talk to an orthopedic surgeon about these things, your mind gets blown. Mike Williams, what kind of injuries does he have? Back problems. Ain't nobody never not had a bad back. Like that is not an injury that one bounces back from. You always have disc issues. Your spine is not something that is regenerative or that can be fixed by putting some Gore-Tex in between the vertebrae. I don't think that Mike Williams can stay healthy throughout the season, which bodes well for Josh Palmer, because I also don't think that a 30-something-year-old Jared Cook is a particular threat, especially as the season continues on. Like, do I think that Josh Palmer is going to have a great opening? No, but can I imagine him post October 31st? By the way, the Mexico City F1 race is on October 31st, and chef's kiss, the altitude in Mexico City and that course is going to be absolutely lit. Anyway, so Josh Palmer, after like last back half of the season, November and December, I think he could absolutely emerge, and like he is the way we're talking about Gabriel Davis this season is, I think, the way we will be talking about Josh Palmer this time next summer.
Yeah, I hope you're right. He's a guy that I'm kind of targeting with my later picks in best ball leagues. There's opportunity there, and I'm glad you mentioned the injury history. Mike Williams throws his body around. He makes some amazing catches. He made some awesome ones in that Saints game last year. I love him as a player, but like you said, he's injured often, and the way he plays is not really sustainable. I was surprised the Chargers picked up his fifth-year option this season. I thought they were going to let him go and try to get Julio or Allen Robinson or something, is what I was hoping, but that didn't work out. But speaking of Allen Robinson, since you indulged my Charger question, you're a Bear fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you rolling with QB1 Andy Dalton, or do you think Justin Fields is going to be in there? I mean, by like week 5, who's the starting QB in Chicago?
Week 5 is an interesting over-under, I have to admit. I mean, the Bears open the season at SoFi against the Rams. There is no way Matt Nagy is letting Justin Fields be mauled by Aaron Donald on Aaron Donald's turf. Not happening. Week 2 is Cincinnati. Well, that's obviously a big narrative game for Andy Dalton, right? So, like, he'll get that gimme unless he is completely broken by Aaron Donald in week 1. Matt Nagy, and again, you have to like temper coach speech, but Matt Nagy said that there is no way that Justin Fields can win the starting job. I think that there is more truth to that than Chicago fans would like to believe, because here's a little like tip, anytime there's a big pull quote from one of these press conferences, particularly after the season, or I mean, in the middle of the summer or in the off season, I always go back to check the lines at BetMGM and see if they've shifted any based on the news. I track them throughout the draft to see like, okay, who are the 49ers going to take, right? And rookie of the year odds for Justin Fields dropped a good amount after Nagy made that statement about him not being able to win the starting job. So I think that there's probably more truth to that than we want to believe. Andy Dalton also we got to remember that last year it was horrific after he, played in replacement of Prescott, but he also got COVID like twice and concussed himself. So I don't know if like if we can really, but by the end of the season, once he like literally got the cobwebs moved out of everything, of his whole torso and brain, like he started to find rapport. So I think with the off season, I would take the over on week 5. I do think we see Fields. I don't think we see him though until middle of October, end of October, maybe even November. I just don't see him getting, because what if he struggles? Then what do you do? Yeah. And Matt Nagy has proven to me to be like a more of a stubborn character, and then also like their jobs are like, I don't know how Ryan Pace gets his job seemed so attached to the success of Mitch Trubisky, and now he's found redemption in Fields. And if you ruin Fields now, early in the season, that's a long 8 weeks to ride out the last half.
Oh, the Bears. They always find unique ways to make things interesting. I just want some stability in Allen Robinson's life. That's, are we...
But you do have that. You do have that from a fantasy perspective in terms of volume. That he is going to see, well, in a 16-game season, 150 targets. So add whatever 150 divided by 16 is plus like add that, extrapolate that out to 17. He's going to see 100. He always gets 150 looks. So your stability is in volume, and fantasy is never not a game about volume.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for us here, Liz. Thank you. You are a legend. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and some great analysis. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate it, and I look forward to chatting more about F1 as that season continues to unfold.
Yeah, I'm going to be in your mention on your F1 tweets, so just be on the lookout for that.
Nice.
All right, thank you. Yeah, tune in. What an episode. Let's get some PF Changs, yeah?
Let's do it.
Thank you guys for listening. Rate and review, all that fun stuff. We are the Mixer at FCwineMixer on Twitter. Best place to get a hold of us. Have a good one.